Welcome to the Pace Moments Leaders in Business podcast. Here we interview thought leaders about finance trends, the evolving role of finance, and how our profitability analytics framework can help you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Leaders in Business podcast from the Profitability Analytics Center of Excellence. And today it's my great pleasure to be speaking with Jay David from Do Business Better. And he has a very interesting background and some great experiences and insights to share with us. So without further ado, take it away, Jay.
Thanks, Rafe. Thanks for having me today. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Yes, as you said, I do have a unique background. As someone once said, I took the road less traveled.
So maybe you can take me through your journey.
Yeah. So I began in the restaurant business when I was a cook in high school, and I showed up to work every day and did a good job, and they wanted me to get into management with them. So I spent my early years as a restaurant manager, doing just about everything: kitchen, back of the house, front of the house, and more. I was good at it, and you learn a lot about business when you're 19 years old and they hand you the keys and they go home and say you're in charge. So I learned a lot of my management skills and things really just on the fly without a lot of guidance. But at some point I reached the point where I didn't feel that this was the best long-term thing for me. I was married and I had a kid and realized I'd be working every weekend and every holiday for the rest of my life. So I'd always taken a numbers approach to even restaurant management. I'll bring up an old software program that very few people that are younger than us may know, but I had an early version of Lotus 1-2-3, and I played with that in the restaurant setting and automated our monthly inventories by doing our counts and auto calculating through Lotus 1-2-3. I also challenged some of the approaches that we had on our food cost. We had a 30% food cost target that was fixed, but it did not flow up and down with product mix. All of our menu items had much different food costs. So I played with Lotus 1-2-3 and came up with theoretical food costs based on product mix versus just the standard. A lot of people didn't understand it, but I used it for my own needs. But it kind of got my brain going that said I need to do more of this and less of the restaurant business. So after one bad day at work, I drove out to the local community college and signed up for a class and began my journey to an accounting degree. And I chose accounting because of that numbers background and how I saw numbers in the things I was doing in the restaurants. And after several years, I came out with an accounting degree and began my first job as a cost accountant with a candy company in Chicago.
Well, that's very interesting. It sounds like you chose a great career path for yourself. How has your background given you a different perspective on business?
A lot of people, they don't have more than one type of an experience. They're either managers, they're either finance people, or entrepreneurs, or working within a company. I always saw the numbers side of the business, but also understood the soft side of the business and how managing people was the most important thing. But along my journey, I realized the numbers only told part of the story. And, really accounting and spreadsheets, some people put them way up here as far as the importance of analysis, and all decisions are based off of that. I saw that as really only a portion of the story. It's good to do. It's a good layer to look at when you're trying to make a decision, but it's not the whole story. And then I began to see kind of the flaws with how, product cost was generated. I saw it in my background with the restaurants, and then I began to see it as I began cost accounting in the candy business and saw how the application of cost to products just really didn't make sense. I got to know the plant managers, the operations guys real well, and understood really how costs happen every day, the causal side of the costs, and began to question a lot of things.
Well, it sounds like you had a fairly typical background in cost accounting.
Mm-hmm.
It's my understanding after that you transitioned into operations. Maybe you could tell me how that occurred.
Yeah, I mean, it again began kind of like the restaurant days where I saw a path that I chose to take. During my time as a cost accountant, one of the things I did, we were having a large capital project in one of our factories where we were needing to model many different sets of ideas on how to lay out the process, staffing models, and things like that. So I used Excel and kind of built an interactive, almost CAD based floor plant layout with drawings on Excel and X's where people stood. And I began using that as an interactive model that became the full justification for this capital project. So a lot of the operations people saw me as more of a resource. I wasn't there just to close the books, but I helped them formulate this project, go after cost savings. And so a lot of the plant managers that we had really saw me as somebody different. So as we move forward, I kind of suffered from the old adage where accountants typically are scorekeepers, but management accountants, cost accountants are in the game. They get out there and they impact the numbers. So that's where I wanted to be. So I began first off taking control of the budget, writing the whole budget for the company over multiple plants and understanding overhead allocations and different things like that. Then moved into a next step of operations analysis where I had to bring together data from 5 different ERP systems and put together a single source of KPIs that the head of operations could use and understand from each plant. And then eventually that turned into a job within operations where I led the justification, analysis, justification, and the closing of 2 factories as we tried to reduce fixed costs. And during that time, the plants affected by that closure reported to me. So I was responsible for their day-to-day leading up till the time that we closed them, and then all the transfers in and out of the plant. So that's really what got me into operations leadership.
I find it very interesting your experience because at Pace we have our profitability analytics framework, and part of our the principles is that before you start financial modeling, you need to have understanding of the operations of the organizations and do operational modeling.
Absolutely.
And so this is very much consistent with the approach that we suggest or recommend it in our framework.
Exactly. And it was funny, my boss, this was in the old days, we had to wear suits and ties to work every day. Anytime we left our office, we had to put the jacket back on, but my boss could never find me because I would take my jacket off, go right to the factory, and be gone for 4 hours. And it was really getting a deep understanding of what was happening on the factory floor, sitting in the plant manager's office for hours on end, using the whiteboard and talking all this through. So yes, and that's how you build models, with a deep understanding of how costs accumulate and why. So definitely, I agree with you there.
Good. So it's my understanding that from your operations experience and position, your thoughts about cost accounting changed, and maybe you can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, within cost accounting, even prior to moving into operations, I became the cost accounting controller for an $800 million multi-plant candy company. And that's where we worked on the ERP systems. But so I was deeply involved in closing the books and valuing inventory and all that, and knew from a GAAP perspective what the definition of product cost was. But then as I flipped into operations and then was being held accountable, for variations resulting from absorption and product costs, quickly learned that those are not KPIs for a factory. An absorption variance, an overhead absorption variance at the end of the month versus actual spending in overhead, those two activities are not aligned in any way. The absorption of fixed costs, they're fixed costs, but the minute that you put them to product cost and then absorb them each month, you've made fixed costs variable. And then you're trying to tell the plant, now you needed to adjust your actual spending on fixed cost categories that we now think are variable. So I would spend month after month, year after year, budget period after budget period, fighting that assumption that gap product cost was a meaningful topic. Done a lot of reading on the side and everything, and Ellie Goldratt in The Goal and Theory of Constraints is a huge cost accounting critic and says that it's actually detrimental when used wrongly in a business. So I had been fighting it for years.
I wouldn't doubt that the variance regarding the absorption of fixed costs is not a widely used metric even today. And I can just imagine the dysfunctional behavior that would lead to. So it's certainly not a good metric to be using.
For sure.
So what would your definition of product costs be?
Well, gap product cost obviously is there because they want to absorb the labor and the overhead into inventory, to value that inventory, to properly release cost of goods sold as product moves out the door. So it's an accounting term that's based on accounting principles, so you can really calculate your tax liability and so on. The way that I spin it is you have product cost, which is gap, but then you have cost to produce, which is not including allocations of fixed costs and so on. So when I look at cost to produce, I think of next cost. How much is it going to cost the plant incrementally to produce the next 1 pound, 100 pounds, 1,000 pounds, million pounds? And that does not include any fixed cost allocations. You get into truly incremental, and really on most new business that comes into your factory, 1 million pounds added to a factory that's already making 50 million pounds. The incremental cost, the truly incremental cost of that 1 million pounds of business is most likely just material, sales commissions, freight costs to get it to the customer. Doesn't include any indirect labor or fixed costs in there. So my definition really, when I talk about it, is the cost to produce, which is a vastly different number.
And again, we're very much aligned in our thinking.
Mm-hmm.
We basically make quite a significant distinction between cost accounting, of which product costing is a important part, which is done for external financial reporting primarily, and we distinguish that from managerial costing, which is costing done for internal decision support.
Right.
And too many organizations just use their product cost that they use for external reporting for internal decision making, and as you said, that can lead to just such dysfunctional behavior on the part of production managers and managers in general.
Well, and it ultimately is destructive, because then there's the perception, if you take gap product cost and you take an assumption of a 20% gross margin on top of that, and then you go into a bidding process for new business, you come back out of that lost bid and you say, we can't compete. Our costs are too high. We've got to cut. And guess where they cut? They cut at the factories. They rarely cut at corporate. So then they destroy a lot of the things that has been set up for safety improvements, quality improvements, the ability to deliver to the products. So you actually turn the company in a bad direction and harm it. So and that's why the argument of truly incremental costs, especially when you're valuing new business, is important. Not that you want to take that truly incremental cost and only make a 10% margin over it, but as a quick example, if the product cost for Gap is $1 and the truly incremental cost is 30 cents, maybe you're attempting to sell that for $1.30 to get your margin over that dollar. But in reality, the customer is saying we're willing to pay $1.10. Well, if you look at it on truly incremental costs, $1.10 versus that truly incremental cost of 30 cents, you've got 80 cents a unit that's going to drop to the bottom line in reality. So you do have flexibility. You can compete on pricing.
Your companies do business better, and maybe you could talk about your mission with that organization.
Definitely. My history has been in several different kind of specialties. Every company that I've worked with has really struggled before I got there with things like product costs, but also quality issues and a lot of things due to improperly funding different departments or having a turnaround plan. So I've been involved in a lot of business turnarounds, from taking companies that either had massive quality issues, couldn't deliver on time, or financially they were struggling, and put together a team and led them down a path of day to day, month to month incremental improvements and turn the company in the right direction. My focus is really mid-market manufacturers. Doesn't have to be in the food business. I look at manufacturing as widgets, whether you're producing a tire, a gummy bear, or whatever. The process is the same, but founder-led companies who are looking to move to the next level. They can't really afford a chief operating officer or a strategic voice, and I can help them get there, help them develop a plant manager into a strategic leader, prepare them for multi-plant or vice president type roles. And then really a lot of my time I do spend on this topic, and that's how you and I connected, I think. I really want to strongly advocate with a different voice from the operations side that cost accounting is hurting your business. So I've got a couple of newsletters on LinkedIn. One of them is the Turnaround Chronicles, and my newest one is Cost Management. And it is trying to educate operations people, but also finance people of costs. And we're going to talk about fixed costs, variable cost, how the time frame that you're looking at impacts that. All costs today are fixed. You can't really do much about costs today. This week, they're most likely fixed, but 6 months from now, there's some costs that are not fixed and can become variable. And it's important to understand those time frames and everything, and trying to bring that. So I'm looking at building a learning module for bringing these skill sets to the table, focused on plant managers. So I'm planning some roundtables and some videos where we teach these topics from an operations perspective, but to help plant managers build their career and be more fully valuable to their organization going forward.
Well, that sounds like a very commendable mission, and especially with that focus on the mid-market, because I know from a lot of studies that I've done, it's the mid-market really struggles. So they don't have that expertise that the larger companies have to really be able to economically analyze situations like you've just described. So kudos to you on that.
Thank you. Yeah, I find that the founder put their heart and soul into the business, and they're experts at what they do, but a lot of times they just don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
And you got to come in with a little bit different perspective, with some credibility, but also with kid gloves a little bit, because you're there and you don't want to talk about their baby as having any flaws, but being able to have a positive conversation about how can we make this better, how can we stabilize it, how can we pass it to another generation, either through selling the company or preparing it for a son or daughter that wants to take it over in the future. So but I think that's probably where I'm best placed.
Well, Jay, thanks for taking the time to talk with me today. It's been a very interesting discussion, and I look forward to further discussions with you on this topic. And before we wind up, I'm wondering if you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with our audience.
Well, Rafe, thanks for your time today, and I appreciate what your organization does. You've got a lot of thought leaders out there that are really bringing this topic forward. My business is Do Business Better. We have a website, dobusinessbetter.com, and there's free consultations where you can book online there. And I'd love to get to know companies out there who are looking for some assistance. Just a conversation to help them break through something. But you can reach me that way, and I'm always happy to help, and appreciate your time today, Rafe. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. We're very much focused on advancing the profession, and there's a lot of knowledge that is out there that needs to be more widely disseminated. So
I agree.
kudos to you too.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to our Leaders in Business podcast. To learn more about profitability analytics, check out the PACE website, join one of our interest groups, and follow PACE on LinkedIn and Twitter.